Have you ever wondered how you got from, through what concatenation of circumstances or conspiracy of events, from point A to wherever you are right now in this room? I mean, if you look at the future, it's nothing but mystery, perhaps adventure, or certainly the unknown. And if you look past, in your past, it appears at times as if circumstances have just lined up in a kind of a fatal line that could not be otherwise. We're going to explore some of that today. You know, whether it's fatality, fatal attraction, kismet, karma. Who knows? We're going to look into how the surprise of events, using Rob's life as an example, things seem to have taken on a certain order. So, Rob, why don't you explain where we're going today?
Thanks very much, Bill. Thank you all very much for coming. Am I into this microphone far enough for y'all to hear me? Good. I'm from Southern Atlanta. Okay, Rennie, thank you out there for your help, Gretchen, and for yours. I was first scheduled to give this talk last June, and it was titled "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Funeral." And then, as a lot of you know, I damn near had one. So we put it off. But with the help of a lot of great medical folks we have in this community, as a lot of us know, things worked out, and I hope this will work out fine too. I need to wrap this up, by the way, by 4:30 because I have to go home and walk the dog. You all understand that. Alice would be here, my charming wife, but she is off celebrating a 12th birthday with her grandson in Anaheim Hills. But there's a camera rolling, so she'll learn about everything. Okay, the way we're going to do this, you'll notice a batch of numbers. That's it. Thank you for coming. What we're going to do is ask, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. Bill will select one of you to just give me the number, and I'll go from there, and I'll tell you the story that lies behind that number. Right. Thank you. Well, that's it. Should Sherman applaud like you did.
37.
Could have counted it. Okay, so who'd like to ask a question?
I don't know the number, but I want to hear the story of being the godfather of a frog.
What number is that?
I think I took that off because it's hanging at the top of the stairs. But I can tell you the story, certainly. It was 1977. I was working at NBC. Are you hearing me okay? Am I close enough to this? I was working at NBC in Washington in the studio crew. And Jim Henson, who was at that point a freshman at the University of Maryland, came in, and he would do with his then girlfriend, eventually wife, a show called Sam and Friends. And this was the beginning of the Muppets. Well, Jim came in one day. This is hanging at the top of the stairs because the things on the stairs are supposed to be out of the closet. Well, Jim came in this afternoon and brought in with him this thing that he had made out of a green coat that he'd taken out of his mother's closet the day before with a couple of ping pong balls. And there were like 8 or 10 of us in the studio. And Jim said, "What do you all think about this?" But it was Kermit the Frog. And we all instantly, of course, fell in love with this little beast and applauded him. And Jim designated us all on spot as Kermit's godparents. So I am a godfather to Kermit the Frog. It was sort of interesting because Jim and Jane would do this. It takes 2 hands to use it. Well, every now and then they were using one hand. There was an open wooden stage, and they were using one hand because they were holding hands beneath the stage. And they were just, Jimmy Henson was undoubtedly the most creative man I think I've ever known in my life. Left this So early was just a shame. Okay, so a number.
Number 9.
Number 9. All right, the first thing I need to do is then cross off number 9. Now this is very difficult. Okay. You have no idea the amount of rehearsal.
Would you like someone to do that?
Number 9. Oh, number 9 has to do, again, back with the National Broadcasting Company in Washington. One of our fine announcers was a guy named Johnny Batchelder. Well, Johnny would do all sorts of things, great microphone voice, and we got him on, he would occasionally do stand-ups on camera, but rarely. Well, Johnny was doing one, and we were shooting in waist shot, and about 4 of us sneak in beneath the camera with the director's approval and knowledge and take his pants off. So here's Johnny standing in the middle of Studio A. So that's number 9.
Okay, so Dennis, how about you picking out a number? It's not that difficult.
Number 13.
Number 13. Okay. Try it. If I cross it off first, then I'll. It took hours to make these damn cards. 13. Well, I'm glad you asked that particular one because it has to do with, everybody remember Jack LaLanne? The fitness. Okay, well, at this point I was running public relations at NBC in Washington. And Jack was traveling around the country and he'd appear, his show was on stations all over the country. Well, every now and then he'd go to one of the bigger stations that was carrying his show. So he's going to come to WRC in Washington where I was. I am sent over to pick him up by helicopter at Baltimore Washington National Airport to bring him back over, because he's an important guy. And all the way back to NBC Washington, I'm cautioning, now, Jack, when we get there, the place is going to be just jammed. We get out of the helicopter, stay close to me, because there'll be autograph fans and everybody else there. Stay close to me when we get out of the helicopter. So we're flying back, and he's quite a guy. We get near NBC in Washington, and I look down, and there's not a damn soul. Nobody's there. So at this point, I am trying to explain to the great Jack LaLanne what is happening. By the way, years later, this was now in California, we were doing a fitness show there. I was now not at NBC, but there's a local health club. And Mrs. LaLanne, who was in her 80s, is there doing push-ups. Quite a woman.
Wow.
So that's Jack LaLanne. I'm glad I brought the picture.
But why weren't there people there? Nobody cared.
Because we had the date screwed up.
Oh.
Never happens, does
No. Did you tell him?
it? Yeah.
So
But what was going on is we brought him in, and Bozo the Clown show was going on.
oh.
And Jerry, you suggesting anything? You were crossing yourself. Like, I sinned
Not
again.
right, no.
Oh, damn.
I'm just trying to breathe.
Okay.
Okay, Ron asked me to do 2 things. I forgot the first.
Oh, yeah.
The second one was please turn off your phones if they're not turned on. Chris, I see you almost have your hand raised, so you want to pick a
Well,
number?
by the way, the electronic thing's being turned on. The pacemakers can stay on.
Are you quite sure about that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to try number 5.
Number 5. This is cumbersome, isn't it?
No, I think it's great. No, but it's working beautifully.
I can't know if I'd eat the cap off if the ink will dry up or not. Number 5, photos over NIH. Okay. I worked for some while at the National Institutes of Health outside of Washington, National Library of Medicine to be specific. And I was heading audio visuals there, and I was asked at one point to make an aerial photograph of one of the buildings in NIH. So we arranged for one of the old Bell Sikorsky helicopters, a huge, clear cockpit. And I'm sitting on the right-hand side. We took the right-hand door out, so shooting down, I'd have a really good shot. And I've got 18 cameras hanging around my neck. And we're up, and I get the pilot is banking off to the right, and one of my camera straps hits the quick release on the seat belt. And this kid flying the helicopter was just back from man. Damn, he was fast. And he rolled, and I'm on his lap. He's laughing his head off, and I wet my pants. So that was an interesting day, but I got the shot.
And you didn't lose any cameras on it?
No,
That's good.
happily not. Okay.
Gillis, do you have a favorite number?
3.
3. Okay. First crossover. Okay. And 3. Oh, this goes back to early days of photography. I mean, I really started early. And I started working because in our little town of Babylon, Long Island, there was a commercial photographer, and he was shooting. I was working for him in his studio, helping with the lights, and he was shooting a model's catalog. Well, I don't know how many of you have been around photographers and models' catalogs, but it was in those days that the model would come in and have her picture taken in different costumes. And the last picture taken, and while this picture was being taken, I smelled something burning. It was my fingers, because the last picture was a nude. And I'd never seen a naked lady. Took years for those to heal. Okay. And next.
We didn't have this procedure mapped out in detail, as you can see, so if you want to do this, you can do it like bingo. You could say 33 bingo. Yeah.
Well,
36 bingo.
36 bingo.
That's my age.
Boy, I can reach that. 36. Oh, it's another photographic thing. In high school, I was shooting photographs for the high school newspaper and whatnot, and our football team was playing, and I was sent out to take pictures of the football team. Well, I don't know, not any of you are old enough, I think, as I am to recall the old Graflex camera. This was not a speed Graflex, but a Graflex, where you look down through a hood into glass. And there's a guy running towards the sideline, running like hell. And I'm trying to keep him in focus. I didn't crank fast enough, and he hit me. The camera went that way, I went that way, and the ball went another. So that was my last time with a Graflex.
I like to begin at the beginning, number 1.
Number 1. All right.
You need a crayon assistant.
I could do Vanna White if you want.
Sure, well, yeah, that'd be helpful. Okay, we're back at NBC Washington, where among other shows we did was the Huntley-Brinkley Report every night. And if you recall, Huntley would come from New York, and Dave Brinkley operated out of Washington. Well, David had a very bad habit in always being very late getting into the studio. I mean, 10 seconds before we go on air, David would appear. And this is not good. So the studio crew, we got together, and one evening, David came running down into the studio 10 seconds before going on airtime into a totally black studio.
Oh.
We turned off every light in the studio. We're all hiding in the control room. David came in, we flipped the lights on. That was the last time David was ever late coming in the studio. Great guy, by the way, David.
Number 24, please.
Number 24. Thank you for doing this. This was good help.
He's good at it.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, wow.
You used to your world.
24. Oh, this refers to my first time on stage. In the little community where I lived in Long Island, one of the local Catholic churches, as many did, every Christmas time would put a creche in their outer yard. Well, I was called in to fill in because the kid, the little child who was first supposed to do this, unfortunately peed constantly. So I was called in, I was the stand-in. My first time on stage.
Where were you?
Shepherd? Oh.
No, I was the little baby. I was the youngster. I was the infant Jesus.
And did you pee?
Eventually. As a matter of fact, if you'll
How old were you?
months.
Oh.
I was just a babe in arms.
Oh.
8.
Really?
16. His legs hanging over the side of the cradle.
Oh, this is more up to date. All of us these days, of course, use computers, and many of those computers have spell check devices on them. And while I was in public health service, I correspond very often, as many of us did, with one of the public health service officers in New York State, a fellow named Peter Slocum. Well, every computer kept trying to send messages to Peter Scrotum.
Wow, look at the time.
Yeah, it's just flying, isn't it?
Time flies when you're having fun.
27.
26. Well, this lady at the front row is.
20.
Well, I think we'll do 27 first.
Uh-oh. Right.
Oh.
Oh.
While working at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, as both my wife and I did, one of my sub-duties was teaching cardiopulmonary resuscitation to staff there, and occasionally sent out to teach CPR around and about the neighborhood in Atlanta. Well, one of the assignments was to go out and teach CPR to a sheriff's department in a nearby county. I've forgotten the name of the county, one of those small ones that surrounds Atlanta. Went out there in a small department, perhaps 8 police officers. Brought with me this little Resusci Annie dummy you've probably all seen. I get out there and trying to teach the cops, well, the sheriff, big fat guy. All right, sheriff, he could not provide CPR because when he went down to crouching, his pistol kept punching him in the gut. And he would not take his gun off. So he could not do CPR. So I threw Resusci Annie back into the car, drove back to Centers to CDC. And it's the middle of the afternoon. Well, CDC, like a lot of big government buildings, have 2 separate parking lots. One, if there are more than 2 people, more than one person. And I've got Resusci Annie in the front seat. So I'm driving into the 2-person part, and one of our security officers is driving up, looking at me, and I'm in deep conversation with Resusci Annie. And he looks at, Miss Diefenbach, is she all right? Grabbed her and went back. Oh, this lady. 19. Oh.
You're enjoying
No, I'm remembering what fun it was. This was such fun because I just had open heart surgery.
Oh, there's a good guy.
And I'm in the where you go after having big time surgery. In the recovery room, yeah. The ICU. And I'm out being walked around outside the ICU. Well, you've probably been in environments like this. You see, they had this big white board where they would have the name of the patient or identification of the patient and the doctor. Well, in this particular ICU, for patients' privacy and whatnot, they would only use the first 3 letters of the patient's name. You got it. First 3 letters of my name just happen to be D-I-E. They changed that. They then started using 4 letters.
A D.
Yes.
D-I-E.
Yeah, that would have been. Next.
35.
Number 1?
No, we did one.
21.
21. 21.
21. Oh.
Better lick it.
Okay, I was,
Sit in this ball.
at a point in time, I was a firefighter EMT. And we were, a group of us were ambulances were responding to an accident outside of Atlanta. We had been told there were multiple ambulances were needed. We got there and what we found, it turns out all right. We found a Volkswagen that turned off the road, upside down, into a shallow creek. And it was sort of scary. So we're hauling these young people out. It evolved to what had happened is the 3 young high school boys driving home from school had found 3 of their high school girlfriends walking down the road, and they jammed these 6 kids in a little VW bug where you can't do that very well. And so they're jammed in there, and they hit this little bend in the road, and the kid cannot turn the wheel, so it rolls. And we get the kids out, and I'm dealing with the driver. And he's got a broken clavicle, I think was it. He's going to be just fine. He said, I'm going to die. I said, you're not going to die. He goes, I'm going to die. You're not going to die. I'm going to die when my mom gets hold of me. You're not supposed to laugh when you're driving an ambulance. 36.
No, it's been done.
We've done that.
Been done.
We did it.
35.
It's a small screen.
Yeah.
Oh, 35. Okay. But at a point in time, I was running a press plane for Vice President Spiro Agnew. And a number of us, we had on board the plane perhaps a dozen nationally important reporters. And the routine would be that, because our plane was separate, we would try to fly into an airport near where the Vice President was going to speak. So the guys and gals on board the airplane could file their stories back to their newspapers or syndicates or whatever. Well, these filing centers were set up by the local Republican committees. And the filing centers needed to have a bathroom, a coffee pot, perhaps a few cold beers, and importantly, typewriters. Well, unfortunately, the Republican committee at this particular stop could not find any typewriters except from a local typing school, which they brought in. Well, typing schools often, as was the case in this one, have typewriters with nothing on the keys. Absolutely blank. So I think the voice I remember screaming out, "Where the hell is the semicolon?" was either Bob Considine or Jim Wooten. Frustrated. Oh, and this is the same stuff. Generally, they would have these filing centers. They'd have somebody guarding the front door to keep bad people from getting in. And we're all dripping with White House press passes. Well, we come up and they've got this National Guardsman guarding the front door. And one of the guys, again, it may have been Bob Considine, goes around the back and he comes back. I said, the back door is wide open. So we go in, we're in there, and this guy is still in the front guarding it. number.
It's not a, you know,
7.
good.
Seven's over here.
Two was first. Two. Two was first, all right?
2 is fast.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, you folks do not quite fit this, what I'm about to tell you about. While with the Center for Disease Control, part of my job was going out and talking with rather large audiences around the country, largely about what we were doing with the Agent Orange projects. But any of you who have ever stood up before an audience, and I'm doing it now, you get on because you've managed to make eye contact with 1 or 2 people in the audience, and that works well. Well, this one particular group were a group of American Indian veterans, Vietnam War. And American Indians, at least this group, and there are like 300 of them, stoic, not one could not get eye contact with anyone. And there were 3 or 4 of us who were addressing this group, and talk about flop sweat. Each one of us sat down. So,
Is there a 7?
7.
7, okay.
oh, Tamsin's not here, I guess. Tamsin at the Halloween party a few days ago had with her this beautiful big black cat. Golly. Well, this reminded me of when I was a little kid. We had my first pet was a big black cat named Tippy, and Tippy was, of course, the family idol. Well, I came out of our front door, and Tippy was sleeping apparently on the front steps, and I stepped on Tippy, and I was sure I didn't, but I was sure I had killed Tippy. And I ran upstairs to my bedroom, and I packed because I had to run away. And you pack, like you put a couple of undies or something in a thing on a stick. Now my mother is sitting on the front porch with a friend. And here comes little Bobby racing out of the house. We're running away. And my mother's friend asked, "Aren't you afraid?" He's good. No, he's not allowed to cross the street. Which I couldn't. I go up to the street corner and turn.
Bobby,
What happened to the cat?
what's your favorite number?
Oh, Tippy was just fine. Lived to, I think, about 17, which is what I think Tamsin's cat is.
Yeah, she's
Give us a number.
22.
22. We, our little community in California, there are a couple of small theaters, independent, local amateur theaters. Well, I was acting on stage with one of these, and it's happened to everybody who's been on stage, something goes wrong. Well, in this particular case, actor A and actor B are on stage. Actor C comes on stage 2 minutes before he is supposed to. It's called Fill for Time. He was looking at, and he tried opening the door to go back in. That didn't work. As a matter of fact, he literally did. He could not get in the door. That was a brief.
23.
23. Oh, then goes back back to running around with Spiro Agnew's deputy press secretary. I've forgotten exactly where it was we were appearing, in a large auditorium somewhere. And this was the 3rd time that day that Agnew had given the same talk, because he went to one place to another with the same speech. Well, somebody in the 3rd balcony yells out at Agnew. And the camera crews, I say, he'd done the same speech, so the camera crews had filmed the same speech 2 times earlier that day. Well, somebody in the 3rd balcony yells out, and Agnew screams out, "You're wrong!" Jumping out, and the camera crews aren't there to get it.
Oh.
So we got on to the next stop and staged it. Which Agnew loved.
Joni, you gonna pick a number?
Yes, 18.
18. One of my favorites. I think. Let me find what it is. Oh, this has to do with Alice. My good wife, some of you will know, is in the U.S. Public Health Service, as I was. Well, Alice is in the Commissioned Corps, a full-ranked captain, four-stripe captain in the Public Health Service. Well, at least in these days, we were living and working in Atlanta. Uniformed officers of the Public Health Service would wear their uniforms one day a week. Just the one day. Well, we were walking to work on, it was a Thursday, I guess. Alice was in uniform, and Alice is a good-looking lady with knockout legs. So we're walking into the office, and our course brings us past the spot where people can sell a pint of blood to buy a pint of whiskey. And we're walking by, and this guy is up against the side of the wall, and he sees this four-stripe officer with great legs striding towards me, drags himself to his feet, comes to this, Christ, lady, where's your ship?
Gary?
32.
32.
I must remember.
Oh. You may recall the great debates, the Kennedy-Nixon debates. But the first of those debates was held at CBS in Chicago. This is where Nixon broke into his famous flop sweat. Don't get to use that term twice in the same day. But he did. Well, the second of the great debates was held at NBC Washington, where I was one of the studio crew. Well, Nixon's gang came marching in with him, looking at the air conditioning and the lighting and this and that, and afraid it's going to happen again. Well, eventually, his people turned to our director, Frank Slingman, and said, yeah, we better put a little makeup on. So Frank turns to me and says, Rob, get the makeup. I got to make up Richard Nixon. As I did a few other people, one that comes very much to mind. Remember Mr. Sam Rayburn?
Oh, yeah.
Very bald.
Yeah.
And I'm patting makeup on Sam Rayburn. He's... That was interesting. Also Bob Hope, who wore a little toupee.
11.
11. Now, Jerry, can they go husband after what? Is that illegal?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
let's finish. This again goes back to being on stage. In this particular case, we were doing this little amateur theater in Guadalajara, California. We were doing, believe it or not, Jekyll and Hyde, the musical. And my role was one of the roles in this, because we all do multiple things. I was Jekyll and Hyde's father, the madman. And I'm the first person on stage. And they roll me out in the straitjacket. And I'm parked beside of the stage while the two other actors are having a dialogue behind me. And what I've got to try to do is just keep my eyes focused on the wall with no expression at all. And about the third show into this, I'm trying to do this, and off to my left in the audience is outrageous laughter going on. A friend of mine who was trying like mad to break me up. He did. Not easy.
What are friends for, huh?
Yeah.
Sonia, you want to pick a number?
12.
Well. Oh, it goes again to one of the plays we were doing outside of our home in California. In this particular case, I was running a spotlight up in the balcony. And our home in California is right on the ocean, where abalone diving goes on all the while. Well, in the middle of this play, it's a very serious moment. Well, the theater is right next to the house of a fellow who's out in his backyard banging abalone. And everybody in the theater knows exactly what's going on. It's a dreadfully serious moment. And everyone in the theater, including the people on stage, are going, we got through it.
Barbara, number, please.
13, is that?
No.
13 we go.
Okay.
14 is taken.
I didn't hear it. Do it again.
Better tell yourself.
14, she said.
14. All right.
Oh, also back in California, working with the sheriff's department there. I was with the fire department and rescue squad there. We got a call at one point where there was a tremendous fight going on up in an Indian reservation nearby. Well, the sheriff, Rich Zweeney, had this huge canine dog named Riley. And I now switch in, I become Rich Zweeney. So we get up there, and these guys just wailing the hell out of one another on the porch. And I let Riley out of the car, and this guy's about to hit. So Riley runs up, and Riley just drops into this kill crouch. And it's like it's a tableau. It's the easiest collar I ever made in my life. Riley was quite a dog.
Frank, how about you? Number, please. Oh. Yeah.
Right, that's you.
That way.
15. Oh, I am dreadfully afraid of playing golf. Not that I have any presidential aspirations, mind you. But I was out, this is again back in Washington, and I was out at country club that I belong to outside Washington. And I'd taken off a bit early on a Friday. And I'm out trying to drive and whatnot. And I hear somebody clear their throat behind me. It's the vice president of NBC. A little earlier up. Yeah, Joe. Last time I ever picked up a golf club.
Okay, David? David?
34.
34. Oh, this is sort of fun. Again, back to NBC in Washington. Well, Willard Scott, Bozo the Clown, was at NBC Washington, and his good friend and radio co-host, a fellow named Ed Walker, and Ed was blind from birth. Well, these two guys were just great buddies. They'd go everywhere together. And we were in the cafeteria one day at NBC, and Ed had ordered a hamburger, and Willard a bowl of soup. Well, they served the food, and Willard reached over, swapped dishes. It worked out rather well because Ed threw the soup at Willard. Ed Walker was just this marvelous guy. As I say, he had been blind since birth, worked on the radio both at NBC and at the nearby American University. Astounding memory for voices, as I guess a lot of blind people have. I had not talked with Ed probably for close to 30 years when we spoke, and 2 words. Rob, how are you? What a guy.
Wow. Marion? You want to give us a number? Yes, ma'am. Make sure it's the right one.
17.
17, okay.
Pardon me. That was not on the screen.
16.
Oh, this goes back to Navy days again. I was a big ad photographer, and I'm an enlisted man.
Excuse me,
I'm sorry. there's no, in those days we're using flash bulbs that go into cameras, you've seen those. And there was no place in an enlisted man's uniform, no pockets to put flash bulbs. So the only place I had was to put them in my socks. Well, I was covering the arrival of Admiral A, and suddenly Admiral B comes up. So when I yeah, let's see what happens. So I'm going down with laughter. The laughter of admirals is unusual. Like it's sort of a snicker.
David, you want to surprise us? The number? No? Okay. Ted, number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2.
It's done.
It's done.
Did that, yeah.
Can't count.
4, 6.
Number 10.
10.
Did that.
No, you didn't.
I
Number
didn't.
10.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Did I have down here twice? That was, didn't I talk about doing Jekyll and Hyde?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, then I have it on my list twice.
I'll take number 16, please.
As long as you said please. Oh, good friend of ours, again, a retired public health service officer, Ray Hudspeth, had this marvelous thing to do. She would, people would come to dinner, and Ray would take the dinner plates, and after dinner, with close friends, he wouldn't do this with strangers, she put the plates on the floor, and her dog would clean the plates. Well, if Ray did not want the people to ever come back, she'd pick up the plates and put them back in the cabinet.
Jenny, number please. Number please. Just we got a
4.
4.
Oh. Well, we're all quite accustomed to seeing President Trump with his teleprompter. Well, back in the early days, we didn't have teleprompters. Going way back, we had them for, I mean going way back. So I'm doing the news one night with Frank McGee. And if you can picture yourself watching at home watching television, and the camera's on Frank, who looks at the camera, looks off to the side of the camera and says, "Rob, turn the card around."
Richard, any Richard?
It's like any Donna.
Yeah, try it, Donna.
-1.
-1. Done that one.
We did, that's Dave Brinkley being.
You still have number 6.
Number 6.
6.
Oh. Well, that, I mentioned I had open heart surgery. Well, a month or so thereafter, because I had asked, I'd done a good deal of surgical photography throughout my life, and I asked my surgeon, a fellow named Keith Corver, who people keep wanting to be calling Keith Carver. Let me come back into the operating room to watch how this is done. I came back in to watch another heart valve replacement. And to keep, I don't know how many, probably a few of you have been in surgeries outside of it as a patient to see what's going on there. Well, surgeons, the chief surgeon, it's quite a thing they do. They have to keep a good deal of tension in the surgery, but to get it too tense, it can be trouble. So what Keith does to try to keep people light is to, well, I'm shooting down over Keith's shoulder into an open chest cavity. He's keeping things light by saying, "Hey gang, guess what Rob did with Nixon?" With makeup on.
Okay, any Sherwood?
Oh, that one.
Oh, yeah. Were we done?
Yeah. Yes, that was brief.
Pick a number.
Oh, pick a number. 30.
All on this side. Girl.
Oh, this is again with Alice being a captain in the public health service. We were driving on board a base somewhere outside of San Francisco with a very straight-faced Marine guard. Well, Alice is sitting on the right-hand seat. I am driving the car. Alice presents her ID as a commissioned officer. The young man looks in the window, sees her ID, comes, as a Marine does, to full right-hand salute to the colonel, to the captain. And well, they teach public health service officers a great deal about a lot of things except military courtesy. I think they do more of that these days. So I'm at the side of him and I say, Alice, return to salute. Return to pay. And she blows him a kiss. I pull away and this kid is still a right-hand salute. Falling over.
We're off? No show. Jack?
26.
26.
It's down here.
After 5:45.
Yeah, you can show it in a minute.
At NBC in Washington, we had a young lady named Patty Cavan who would interview people daily on a radio show. Well, one of her guests one day, pardon me, was Milton Berle. So, and Milton, very famous guy, so that those of us that worked there all just jammed into the radio studio, looking through the glass down, and Berle is talking to Patty Cavan in front of him, and he's talking. And those of us in the control room are going crazy trying to get things going, with which Berle looks up in a very loud voice and says, "Gotcha."
Anybody?
29.
29. Oh. Okay, I was a member for a while of the White House Press Photographers Group. We were having a big annual meeting in Washington. It was sort of an annual party. They were all seated in tables of 10. Very, very formal situation. One of the guys at the table was, at that point, the pilot of Air Force One, Colonel Ralph Abertazzi. And we're all chit-chatting, and somebody's admiring watches. And Colonel Abertazzi, because Air Force One is always on time. And we asked to see his watch. He takes off his watch and passes it around. And as that's going on, we're still all in conversation. Well, a few moments later, again, we're a table of 10, we dump 9 wristwatches into Colonel Abertazzi's lap. And his was missing. He got it back. You don't screw around with the pilot.
We got 4 more. That shouldn't be hard to figure out. So
33.
33.
That's going to work out just about well. The cat's going to get walked on time.
It's a dog.
Yeah, true. Oh, okay. It's back to the days. I think most of us have been around long enough. You go to a hotel and you wouldn't get a magnetic card. You get a key.
Yeah.
And on the side of the key, it generally said, "If lost, drop in any mailbox." So again, now we're in this press plane and traveling all over the country. And we got back to Washington at the end of this 10-week routine, and I've got hundreds of press keys. And I dumped them all in the mailbox in my house. And then sat in my car and waited for the mailman. It was an odd one.
Janice? Janice, number please.
Oh, okay. Is it a 34?
That's taken. 31.
Did that?
Sure would have helped.
Oh, okay.
31 or 28?
Do y'all remember Nanette Fabre?
Yes.
Well, again, all right, I'm in the Navy. I'm at the Naval Air Station in Norfolk, Virginia. And, I'm doing public relations and various other stuff. Well, Nanette Fabre's agent sent her to have her picture taken with some sailors. And it became my role to show her the inside of a Grumman Avenger, TBF. The name of the plane was a fighter, a torpedo bomber, quite an aircraft. So I'm showing Miss Fabre through the innards of the TBF. Well, when Grumman built this aircraft, they provided for all sorts of marvelous things, except for places for either the pilot or the crewman to relieve himself. So what they did was they had little funnel-like things. So I get Miss Fabre up into the cockpit, and she said, "Oh, this must be the intercom?" Well, this was in the days before Purell. So all I could do is help her to the ground and say, yeah.
Intercom. In a way, I guess.
Yes.
We'll say.
25.
Anybody prefer 28? Or 20? Which?
25.
25.
25. No, it's 28 or 20.
Do I get to choose?
25, okay.
25?
Your choice. Jeez.
Well, I think somewhere in the introduction to this whole mess, it described it as a naughty boy. And one of those things was being sent home from kindergarten. Because I ate the glue. Yeah, they make up the glue, it's just nothing more than flour and water. And I ate it all, and I was sent home. It was a tacky introduction. Sorry.
Any 20s?
Sure.
I'll take 20.
Okay, 20. So,
You're getting very casual.
Okay, so all right, this sort of combines two things. In the Navy, I've been sent out on board an aircraft carrier to take photographs of, among other VIPs we're visiting out there, take pictures to bring back to Norfolk, where I was stationed. Well, one of the people on board the aircraft carrier was Senator McClellan. I forgot the chap's first name. Very important senator. And he needed to get back to Washington. Well, I needed to get back more. And they bounced him and sent me back in his airplane. So it's now 15, 20 years later. I'm doing Meet the Press. I'm with NBC. I'm the assistant director of Meet the Press. McClellan is the guest. Throughout the show, get off the air. It was you, wasn't it? Aye, sir, it was.
boy, we're down to, who would have thought, 28.
28.
That was that recording.
Oh. I used to love handguns before I got into photography. I used handguns. Well, I was at my home in an apartment outside of Washington, and I had just finished, I was in the process of finishing cleaning a handgun, and there came a rapping on the door. And I put the oily gun behind my back, and there were two young Mormon missionaries that came in. And they plopped themselves down on the sofa. And yippee, 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 yippee. And I took it for about as long as I could, and I said, well, gentlemen,